You're listening to Stealing from Wizards, Volume 4, Arson, by R.A. Consul. Chapter 2. Scales. Could you take me back, please? Kuro asked the darkness. Silence replied. He had lost track of Shingle in his fall and was hesitant to try moving, given the broken glass on the ground around him and no sense of what lay beyond it. Are you still here? He asked a bit louder. It was possible, likely even, that she'd blinked away again the moment they were separated. He had just long enough to imagine that he'd been forever abandoned in the blackness, that the cavern would be his tomb before he got a response. Shh, hissed Shingle.
You'll wake her up. How did you get here? I thought you were anchored.
He had trouble imagining anyone could still be asleep after he smashed all those plates, though he wasn't going to argue with his only way out. Sorry, he whispered. It was an accident. I didn't mean to follow you. Could you please bring me back?
I can't bring you back after seeing this,
she replied. Seeing what? Said Kuro. He couldn't see his hand in front of his face, though that was slowly becoming less true. His eyes were adjusting to the darkness, and he could make out the very faint blue glow of luminous slime mold coating the cavern ceiling far above. He guessed that she was emphatically gesturing at something based on the sound of ruffling fabric and the exasperated tone of her whisper.
The dragon!
That had the intended effect of thoroughly silencing Kuro. Kuro had never encountered a dragon before, as evidenced by his still being alive. He knew quite a bit about them, but believed less than half of it. Wizards enjoyed adding a dragon or two to any story of adventure and danger. They were large and terrifying, and their habit of hoarding treasure, eating livestock, and indiscriminate burning made them excellent villains. Dragons were also quite rare, being dangerous creatures with valuable corpses. Wizards had killed most of them and sold them for parts. He'd also read a book on how to tame dragons, which had sufficiently convinced him to never try. It was a hobby for people who weren't concerned about keeping all of their limbs. Kuro felt the ground beneath him. The unstable pile of metal on which he had stumbled and fallen made sudden and terrible sense. He traced his thumb around the rim and across the surface of one of the many metal discs. A gold sovereign. Akkadian. His pickpocket fingers knew it intimately.
I'm going to be in so much trouble,
muttered Shingle. He was confused why the Luton was still there. She could have blinked away, leaving him to get eaten and all evidence of her mistake to be slowly digested in a dragon's gullet. She hadn't left, but didn't seem to be making any moves to rescue him. You are definitely in a lot of trouble, said a new Luton voice, this one from behind him. It was familiar, though it lacked the jovial tone it usually carried during dinners at Autumn Lodge.
Lord Ingot,
squeaked Shingle. Of all the places on the planet you could have brought him, Ingot sighed. Why did you bring him here? We looked everywhere else we could think of before imagining you'd come here.
I'm so sorry. I was startled. I didn't mean to,
she pleaded. We'll talk about that later, in private, said Ingot. He raised his voice in impatience. Apparently, he wasn't worried about the dragon. Of course, he could disappear before the jaws clamped shut if needed. Let's get him back to where he belongs.
After seeing this,
Shingle protested.
What if he tells someone? What if he comes back?
He hasn't seen anything, said Ingot. It was true. Even having adjusted to the darkness as best as his feeble eyes could, he was still almost blind. High above, a film of luminous slime mold glowed a barely visible blue. At ground level, he could make out only the faintest glimmer of the seemingly endless field of gold coins, like starlight reflecting off a lake on a moonless night. Wizards have very poor night vision. Kuro startled as Inga's voice was suddenly coming from right beside him. There was a sense of motion and a flicker of extra darkness across his field of vision, as though Ingot were waving his hand in front of his face. And a terrible sense of direction. He has no idea where he is, so unless you told him something... The response to that statement came not from Shingle, but from what felt like the earth itself. A rumble like distant rolling thunder circled the vast space twice before bursting forth in a booming wave of hot air, like a volcano chuckling to itself. "The dragon's awake, isn't it?" Kuro asked. "Oh, Shingle." In his mind's eye, he could see Ingot burrowing his face in his palms. Then, in his mind's ear, he could clearly hear a voice, though not of his own imagining. "Oh yes, the dragon is awake." It was a voice of whale song and tree trunks groaning in the wind, slow and sleepy, yet incomprehensibly huge. Bypassing his ears, it spoke straight into his brain, drowning out all his own thoughts with its magnitude. "Milady," Ingot said, "so sorry to disturb you. It seems our young Shingle has brought an uninvited guest." "I gathered as much." The dragon did not seem upset, though it was hard to be sure. Perhaps dragons expressed their displeasure through what sounded like laughter and joyful sarcasm. "A wizard, no less. What an honor. Shall I illuminate the setting to better suit your eyes?" The dragon exhaled a river of fire, which swirled around the full circumference of the cavern. Ingot and Shingle were nearby, both appearing unsurprised by the tornado of flame, which was the only reason he didn't panic. For what seemed like minutes, Kuro's vision was filled by nothing but the blinding brightness of those flames, until the air at the center, where he stood, started to grow hot and thin. So hot were the flames that the piles of gold which had soaked in them were glowing orange, illuminating the cavern with the light of a fading sunset. He found that the layer of coins at his feet covering the rocky ground were just the overflow from an incredible hoard. Mounds of gold as tall as he were piled around a cavern big enough to play a lacrosse match in, audience included. He did not, however, see a dragon. Until he did. He had been looking for a dragon somewhere in the room. But the dragon was the room. Kuro had to spin to take her all in. Her body circled the cavern 3 times, a serpentine form interrupted only briefly by 4 muscular limbs. What he had initially believed were crystalline formations on the walls of the cave were her scales. Each one was like a cut gem, a scalloped, polished, iridescent jewel, shimmering like the veil in the light of the glowing gold. Together, the overlapping scales formed a mosaic of blues and greens, whites and reds, like swirls of ocean currents wrestling with flowers in the wind. Her head he was not prepared for, and found himself disbelieving it even as he gazed into her astonishing eyes. Her irises were a landscape of gold, copper, and bronze ridges around vertical slitted pupils of perfect black, bottomless wells of darkness. Scaled lips were pulled back to expose a menacing grin of curved, pointed, interlocking teeth, each easily as long as he was tall. Twisting, elegant horns gave her a crown of ivory spirals, and a frill of extra-long scales around her neck looked almost like a lion's mane of cut glass. She was magnificent, monstrous, beautiful, and incomprehensibly large. Unlike the stuffed and mounted dragon heads he had seen displayed by wizards, tiny, ugly, vicious in comparison, her face was full of life and expression. She appeared amused, curious, perhaps a little mischievous. "I understand wizards to be quite dangerous," she said, her thoughts crashing through Kuro's mind like a stampede of elephants. Then, faster than anything that large had any right to be, she pounced, her face stopping mere feet from him, her muzzle occupying his entire field of view. "Should I be afraid?" She gave the air of a cat toying with a beetle she'd caught, deciding whether to eat it or just bat it around for a while to amuse herself. No, miss," he stammered. "I'm not a very good wizard." "My Luton tell me most aren't." He was tempted to correct the record as to what he had meant, but was distracted by the need to maintain his balance as the dragon sniffed him hard enough to raise concerns about getting sucked into her nostril. "You smell delicious." That made Kuro truly fearful for the first time. Until that point, the calm of the Luton had convinced him he wasn't in mortal danger. He found himself scrambling away as fast as he could at the threat of being eaten. There was nowhere to go, though. He was ringed by piles of red-hot gold, and the dragon could casually reach anywhere in the cave. "He's the cook," said Ingot plainly, apparently unmoved by Kuro's imminent devouring. A rumble of interest sounded deep within the dragon's body. She turned her head to inspect him first with one massive eye, then the other. "It's that wizard," she said. "The Kuro monster, the baker. Fascinating." She drew out the last word, which rattled like a river of petals through Kuro's mind. "Your cookies are outstanding. The dumplings less so, but still agreeable." "You like my cooking?" Kuro's mouth said, though his brain wasn't fully participating in the conversation. Rather than dealing with the inescapable peril of the situation, it was busy distracting itself with puzzling out the mechanics of something so big eating a single cookie. A wheelbarrow full would barely be a bite for her. He noted, in his giddy haze of terror and awe, that there was a hint of fish and radish on her breath. "Mostly, yes," she said. "Do you bring her the food I make?" he asked Ingot and Shingle. Shingle jumped in.
"Oh yes, she's been enjoying the variety."
Ingot cut her off.
"Which was all fine and good until you brought him here."
He glared at his junior.
"Now we have to decide what to do with him."
"It's no matter to me so long as he keeps baking," said the dragon, appearing to have lost interest in the problems of tiny things. She pulled her head back to the perimeter of the cave and nestled in the coils of her own body. She lounged there, sleepily observing the guests in her cavern in the fading light of the glowing metal, now a dull cherry red. Ingot massaged his temples to help work through his frustration. Through no fault of his own, he had just been saddled with the problem of Kuro.
"We can just keep him in the hollow,"
said Shingle, cheerily suggesting a lifetime imprisonment in complete darkness.
"We can get a working oven here, probably." "The wizards will look for him."
It wasn't the full-throated opposition that Kuro might hope for, but it was at least a defense of some kind. Shingle scoffed.
"They'll never find him down here."
Ingot blinked right up to her, finger in her face.
"Never underestimate wizards," he scolded. "You will rarely get a second chance to do so."
She blinked back far enough to breathe, but looked sufficiently shamed by Ingot's admonitions to stay silent. He continued. "The hounds will catch his scent on us. Even if we can wash it clean, you'll commit every other Luton who serves here to lying to wizards. That is, if we can even keep Kuro contained. Do you want to guard him day and night? He has a knack for escape. Do you feel that breeze? He's already starting to feel around for exits." The accusing finger leveled at him pulled Kuro into the conversation. Sorry, he said. "Force of habit." He hadn't been having any luck anyway. He'd seen a few crevices while the light was good enough to see anything, but they didn't lead anywhere. The cavern appeared to be entirely sealed off. "Is this all a secret?" he asked. This seemed like the time to present a stirring defense, to soften their hearts and urge them to follow their conscience. Unfortunately, that wasn't within Kuro's skill set. What he could do, though, was stay quiet. "I can keep secrets." It had become almost too dark to see, but there was still enough of the dim red light to be startled when Ingot appeared less than a foot away from him. After a long, hard look, the Luton asked, "Would you promise?"
"You can't trust a wizard promise,"
sneered Shingle.
"Everyone knows that."
Ingot ignored her.
"Would you promise our dragon to keep her a secret?"
He asked it slowly, making it clear what he was offering and what he was demanding. A fairy promise, old magic, names and truth and blood. The young Luton Bindle had taught Kuro. Ingot knew that. Unlike wizard promises, which were merely words, these could not be broken. Trying was painful, succeeding fatal. That Ingot would ask him for such a promise made it clear how important this secret was. "I don't know her name," said Kuro as he searched the ground for a piece of the broken dishes he dropped. "We call her Mere Pogo," he said, with the affection of one speaking of a beloved grandparent. Kuro sliced the tip of his thumb as he spoke. "I, Kuro, promise you, Mere Pogo, that I will do all I can to keep you and this place a secret." And to cook for me, she mumbled sleepily into his mind. He hesitated. She sounded playful, as though it may have been a joke. But at the same time, he was afraid to offend the dragon or risk the trust of the Luton. And to cook food for you when it will not risk exposing your secrets, he said. The power of the promise took hold. It coiled around his heart and bound him to its truth, bigger and stronger than any he'd made before. It felt as though he'd made a promise to the whole planet. He shuddered and fell to one knee. Merepogo shivered as the promise ran along her length, scales rustling against each other like autumn leaves. A wizard promise, she said dreamily. I've never had one of those before. It's quite a rare treasure. Thank you for listening to Stealing from Wizards. If you liked our show, please consider rating or reviewing on iTunes. If you want to support this podcast or just can't wait for the next chapter, the full book is available on Amazon, Kobo, and Indigo. Our theme music was written by Camille Saint-Saëns, transcribed by Franz Liszt, performed by Rebecca Verdun, and used with permission. This episode was produced by Jim Tigwell.